Hi, I'm Joe Calloway.
And I'm Randy Pennington. We talk about leadership.
We do. Let's talk about innovation. You for it? I'm for it.
I'm for it. It's just we don't do it very well.
You know, we don't do it very well, but boy, we sure talk about it a lot. We meaning everybody. Everybody talks about, well, we're building a culture of innovation, and we want everybody to be an innovator. And innovation is the only way we're going to be able to compete. How do you think we're doing on that?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I think there's some companies that are doing amazing.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Sure.
USAA, for example, comes to mind.
Great company.
They're just an
Such a
amazing
great
company, and they do an incredible job of innovation. And here's one of the things that I think they do better than most people is they involve everybody in innovation. That's one of the things that kind of bugs me is we have an innovation lab or we have an innovation group.
Okay, I'm about to take you on that.
Yeah, and I think that's okay, but it sort of assumes that there's only a handful of people that can innovate.
Here's what I think. I think that if you say, well, we're just going to let it bubble up from the organization, everybody's going to be an innovator. I don't think you're going to. I think you can see little continuous improvement here and there. But as far as a game-changing innovation, we'll just let it kind of happen organically. I think you have to have a separate room, a separate building with an innovation team focused on making innovation happen through a process, implementation, the whole deal. Otherwise, you'll make little bitty improvements here and there. So tell me how big innovations bubble up from the crowd.
Here's what I heard from the folks at USAA. They have a group, and by the way, they do have a separate room, a separate process, and anyone can participate. That's the difference. Anyone can participate. So one of the things they told me is that for everyone who has an innovation or an idea that is implemented, and they've done some big ideas over the years.
Yeah.
They were doing the copy your check and deposit it, scan it and deposit it way before anybody else, mostly because there's not a lot of ATMs in Kabul.
Good point.
So they told me that the person on their team who had the most ideas implemented a few years back was the part-time security guard that worked on the weekends.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they have a separate room.
He had a lot of time to think.
He had a lot of time to think. He didn't have anything to do. He loved their business. And so I'm not against the separate room, the separate process. I'm not against any of that. Here's the thing, though. It's the best organizations allow anyone the time to think wherever they can. And so that's one of the things I think they do better than most people. They probably have a group that does big things, but they also say, you know what, if you're not part of that group and you have an idea, we're still going to give you time for it.
We're totally on the same page with that. And listen, I mean, I teach innovative thinking and creative thinking to groups for leaders to pass down through groups. I do think, though, to see significant innovation, and we're back pretty much, I think, on the same page. If you don't have a team dedicated to taking the idea and then taking it to stages of testing and all of that, all the way through innovation, then it's just going to be whatever happened to that idea. That was a good idea. You've got to have some mechanism in place to make it happen, or it'll just float away.
Here's one other thing that I want your opinion on.
Okay.
If you're willing to have innovation, you have to be willing to have failure.
Yeah.
And that to me is a place where I see that companies sometimes don't get it right. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you're empowered to innovate. Just don't ever screw up.
One of my favorite clients, it's a bank, the CEO, he said not too long ago in a public forum, he was asked by the interviewer, how many of your projects, initiatives, how many of them succeed? He said about 50%. He said, if everything you're trying is working, then I question how big, hairy, and audacious your ideas are. And this is a bank talking, saying we fail half the time. Now, this bank, though, is moving forward much more quickly than most because of what you just brought up. They are willing to test, fail, learn from that, adjust, and then move on.
And my guess is they fail quickly.
You fail quickly. That's like you have a lot of ideas, you kill the bad ones quickly.
That's hard.
It's hard.
One of the,
hey, business is hard.
one of the things that Reed Hastings said years ago, and Netflix changed the video world for the most part. And Reed Hastings said, my biggest fear is that we wouldn't make the jump from DVD to streaming.
Yeah.
Because that innovation, leaving that place where you've been, is really, really hard.
Well, and that's the test. Are you willing to let go of something that is presently working and working just fine in order to do the scary work of finding the next thing that's going to work?
So what's the news on innovation? What's the takeaway? What's the takeaway for everybody right now?
I think that it's a couple of three takeaways that come to mind from what we said is everybody ought to be an innovator. You should have a culture of innovation. That you should have a mechanism then to put innovations, test them, put them into play, and that it's scary.
And you're going to fail.
And you're going to fail. You're absolutely going to fail.
And that's okay. That's part of the process.
Part of the process.
If it's, one of the things that I tell my clients is if it's worth doing great, it's worth first doing wrong.
My friend Arnie Malham, Do It Wrong. He's got a book out called Do It Wrong. Do it wrong, do it better. After you do it right, you do it wrong, you learn from that, and then you do it better. That's the way it works.
That's the way it works. Okay, so we're going to talk about culture in a later episode.
Yeah.
So don't worry if you think, well, tell me more about culture. We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
But for right now, 3 great ideas on innovation.
Yeah.
That it?
We'll talk some more.
We're done. See you soon.